When India earned her freedom in 1947, many in the West thought the idea of India was noble but almost impossible. Today, India has arrived on the world stage.
For in Asia and around the world, India is not simply emerging. India has emerged.
The ascent of India is one of the biggest untold stories of modern times.
सोतों का तो क्या कहना, मुर्दों को जगा देंगे, हम मुल्क के बच्चे हैं और मुल्क की खिदमत में बच्चों को कटा देंगे.
Civilization in India is over 6,000 years old. Yet, the modern Indian nation is only over 6 decades. Just when did Indians start thinking of themselves as one people, one country?
People often think that how does India survive? With hundreds of languages, with almost every conceivable religion, caste and ethnic groups, etc. Yet, how do we survive?
This poem about India as a geographical expression is the first known idea of India. The second idea of India happens in Ashoka's empire. His ideas survive till date, etched on rock.
What Ashoka's doing is taking the ideas of the Buddhists, the Eightfold Path, truthfulness, compassion, right conduct, and the teachings of the Jains on non-violence, and making them not only the core of personal morality, but of politics. It's moving the sphere of politics away from the sanctions of religion and magic to the rule of reason and morality.
India under Akbar is the next big idea of India. What is his idea?
So the idea of India by the time Akbar arrives on the scene is an idea of a kind of a cultural universe which has certain markers, which has languages, which has religion, which has a certain way of relating to people, which has a certain worldview. And Akbar sees himself as sitting on two conjoined legacies.
The idea of India under British Raj was to fix the once fluid borders of India.
In the 19th century, they used to describe India as a geographical expression. It's not a nation.
In 1915, a young Indian barrister came into this British India from South Africa with a very different idea. It transformed ordinary Indians into freedom fighters.
100,000 Englishmen simply cannot control 350 million Indians if those Indians refuse to cooperate. Gain independence, we must prove worthy of it.
History has taught us that nations are formed on the basis of religion, ethnicity, or language. How did India, with over 8 religions, 500 ethnicities, or 1600 languages, become one?
In 1967, Neville Maxwell, he's the Times correspondent, in a series of articles which were entitled India's Disintegrating Democracy. What did he say? The great experiment of developing India within a democratic framework has failed. Has failed. He predicted that the fourth general election, which were then forthcoming, would be surely the last election to be held in India.
The world's biggest democracy is one label that often hides the many truths of this democracy. it has become India's biggest identity. Is it also her biggest achievement?
The fact is that the last elections 5 years ago gave the world the extraordinary phenomenon of an election being won by a woman political leader of Italian origin and Roman Catholic faith, Sonia Gandhi, who then made way for a Sikh, Manmohan Singh, to be sworn in as Prime Minister by a Muslim, President Abdul Kalam, in a country 81% Hindu.
After debating for 3 long years, India's founders make many choices, from the fabric of the flag to the form of government. In a society arranged by caste, ethnicity and religion, they choose democracy.
हाँ डेमोक्रेसी क्या कर सकती है डेमोक्रेसी का हक है हर वक्त हक है इस समय हक है कि मुझे हुक्म दे आप हुक्म दे निकलो तुम यहाँ से मैं चला जाऊंगा आपको हक है मैं अलग जाके व्यक्तिगत रूप से अपना काम करूंगा आपको हक है मुझसे कहिए कि तुम गलत काम करते हो प्रधानमंत्री नहीं रह सकते मैं फौरन निकल जाऊंगा
I think the Constitution itself is the culmination of a remarkable journey.
Nehru said that the experiment that we are making of building modernity in India through democracy, modernity in the sense of industrialization, etc. He says this is an uncharted path in history.
In 1952, there were 5,000 people who were basically MLAs and MPs who were elected, and they were governing the entire country. Today, we have more than 3 million people elected.
6 decades later, the debate is no longer over democracy. It is shifted to what is it delivering?
What point is democracy if 4 generations down the line, things get better?
I mean, 1 out of 4 members of the last Lok Sabha had a criminal record.
I think the general feeling is, look, what you did was the right thing, but new challenges arise and you've got to face them. And frankly, don't underestimate the contribution that democracy makes to strengthening social capital.
Are there any fault lines in the edifice of democracy?
Are you embarrassed by the fact that the world's largest democracy has 120 political dynasties where sons and daughters are promoted simply because of their fathers and mothers?
Absolutely not.
You're not embarrassed?
Karan, for God's sakes, we're living in the world's largest democracy.
अब सरकार कभी आपकी बीजेपी की आ जाए कभी कांग्रेस की आ जाए इसे बदलना बहुत आसान है क्योंकि ये कहना चाहिए वोटर्स के हाथ में है ये लेकिन एक समाज को बदलना बहुत मुश्किल
Everybody, we were all socialists at that time. To be enlightened was to be socialist. Only later we realized that it was leading us to a dead end.
India's $1 trillion economy is already world's 4th largest by purchasing power parity.
What's happening in India is good not only for the Indian people but also for the global economy.
Millions are out of abject poverty. A bigger triumph has been to create a mood of hope and a new belief that yesterday's underclass can become today's middle class.
आज हाथों में है मेरा सपना मेरी मारुति मेरा सपना मेरी मारुति मेरी मारुति
India was well known for its bright economist but a dull economy. The Indian elephant was constantly behind the Asian tigers.
If you went back before 1991, and I'm going to use a cricketing analogy because Indians love cricket. See, what we were doing is the following. The umpire stood in the middle of the field and he handed out licenses to the batsmen. So you can score 47 runs, somebody else, you can score 15 runs. He told the bowler, you can now bowl a spin ball and so on. And of course, you can't get a game like this.
It took near bankruptcy in 1991 for the government to change economic policy.
This change that Manmohan Singh did in 91 had amazing impact on our society.
Now in 1991 we stopped this process, told the players they could do whatever they felt like. And for a while we had a great game.
Even as this economic boom enters its third decade, India still has more poor people than any country in the world.
But what is upsetting is that this growth is not translating into development.
Because you can't have two sets of Indians, one going at a very fast pace, having the best in life, opportunities, material goods, and the other still struggling to meet basic requirements.
Very soon, there will be more young people in India than any other country. Can the economy rise as high as their expectations?
Good morning, and may I help you, sir?
Is it possible to book a car in advance?
Of course, sir.
Then can you book a new Beetle for my 18th birthday?
Great choice, sir.
Merely having a large number of young people and running an economy that can't employ them is actually not a demographic dividend, it's a demographic disaster.
Now, we are proud of our growth, but it's the institutions which are letting us down. And so that is really the agenda.
Can the rupee rule the roost?
ABCD ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ODVD ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ CTV ਵੀ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ LCD ਵੀ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲਾਲ ਮਰਸਰੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲਾਲ ਕਿਲਾ ਵੀ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੋ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੋ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ
सजना से काहे आए लाज सजनी छूने पे अंग मोहे आज सजनी
Who would have ever dreamt that we'd be seeing Indian cultural dancing on this program? It's fantastic to see.
Since antiquity, India has attracted the world by her material and metaphysical offerings. Traders came to get silk, gems, spices, but took back Buddhism, yoga, and Kama Sutra as well.
India, if I had to sum it up, gave people who are not religious in the traditional ways a way to be spiritual. It turned us from original sin to original bliss.
What is attracting the world to India today?
We're one of the Britain's most popular cuisines, Indian.
Curry is a national obsession, and these days we all expect really high standards from our Indian restaurants.
Every Indian dish, cooked properly, it has the power to actually arrest people time after time after time.
These were the scenes greeting SRK, as he's known in India, as he arrived at a late-night premiere at Berlin Film Festival.
What's happening is that the world is gravitating towards countries which can actually tell stories, and we've always had a lien on telling stories for the longest time.
So particularly in UK and yes, you know, in the parts of America also, Bhangra is going strong. But yes, Bollywood, Bollywood is making a rise over there.
India's quintessential appeal has also been its vast spiritual heritage.
India appears to have concentrated more intently than either of the other two on the psychological question. Who are we?
Today, it is translocated from seekers at its shores to preachers overseas.
You could spend many lifetimes here. India is holy, it is whole, it is healing.
Is the allure of India through movies, mysticism and masala transient, or helping it transition into a new soft power?
The biggest soft power thing, in my view, is, as I said earlier, that here's a nation of 1.2 billion people with huge differences, moving ahead largely, almost largely on our own, and a society that is constantly criticizing itself.
Can India's soft power ultimately emanate from its innate multiculturalism?
I think that's the strength of this country, and that is also the beauty of this country.
Can it attract the world by the power of example?
In today's world, it's not the side of the bigger army that wins. It's the country that tells a better story that prevails. And India is and must remain, in my view, the land of the better story.
The Indian experiment is quite special, and it continues to be quite special. But because of its scale, its ambition, its recklessness, it's also flawed, it's unfulfilled, it's in the process of making, and it's facing a series of challenges.
The ascent of India means different things to different people. To the capitalists, it's the triumph of free markets.
I think we are entering into another golden age of growth.
To modernists, of democracy.
And every 5 years, people of India come out and make sure that their destiny is in their hands.
To liberals, of multiculturalism.
We are such a diverse nation, and we have so many different cultures, and yet we, at the end of the day, come as one voice as Indians.
But has India kept its tryst with destiny? A promise that it made to herself at the hour of her birth?
Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially.
Education, health, energy requirements, housing. These are public goods. Now, you don't have to be a very investigative kind of journalist to figure out that the poor are absolutely unserved by the state when it comes to these things.
Somewhere in 2030s, India will be the most populous country in the world. Will it be a land of opportunities or missed opportunities?
In the 2030s, the urban-rural divide that we see in India would be reduced drastically.
So at some point, when this new middle class begins to pervade into the economic system, they will begin to demand governance. This could show through in many, many ways. It could be violent, it could be peaceful, and we have many examples of this phenomena in other countries.
Is India on course to overcome her immense challenges?
Today the requirement is, how can India become a manufacturing hub? How can our GDP numbers clock in 10% a year? How do we make inclusive growth possible?
1% of the poor have been crossing the poverty line for 25 years. Now that's more than 200 million people.
I also blame the foreign press and the foreign politicians and the media when they claim that this is India's century or India's already arrived, because then that doesn't let us focus on what our problems are within.
How will India impact the world in 2030?
We will become the third largest GDP in the world. After China will be number 1, USA number 2, India number 3. We will not be the richest country. This is very important. You can have a large GDP, mainly because you have a lot of people. But the point is, our GDP then will not be the GDP of a low-income country. I mean, it won't be the GDP of a rich country, but it'll be the GDP of a middle-income country, and that gives you a lot of clout, a lot of flexibility, and as a market, you become very important.
What are the choices Indians must make today to make the India of tomorrow?
I believe we are capable of rising to the challenge and fulfilling our potential and becoming one of the great economies and one of the most moderating influences in the modern world, in a complex, ever-changing, unpredictable world. But only if we set our house in order today. And I believe the stakes for the world are as great as they are for India, because what happens to 1/6 of humanity cannot but impact the rest of the world.
Namaskar, I am Manish Gunte. This season, what's the biggest story waiting to be told? The Ascent of India.